Hey everyone. Hello, hello, hello. We are live today and I want to welcome you. Welcome to everybody that's there. And I want to give it just a second if you're joining us live because we are about to get into something really good today. Okay. So I'll just give it a couple seconds. All right. Okay. All right. So let me ask you something. Have you have you ever given your team clear direction? Well, at least you thought it was clear. And then you watch them go in a completely different direction anyway. And if this is your first instinct, something to the tune of, why don't they just get it? Well, most of us would never say that out loud, right? But we've actually probably thought it. It may have been more than once. It possibly may have been this week, if I'm being honest. Maybe you sat in a meeting and realized that your team has been working on something for 2 weeks that was never actually the priority. Or you asked someone to handle something and they came back with a result that entirely missed the mark. And it wasn't because they didn't try, but instead it was because they were working for something that was never quite clear to begin with. If any of what I've said so far feels familiar, good. Stay with me. Why? Because today we're going to get into something that most leadership content completely skips over. We're going to talk about why your team is confused. And more importantly, why it's not their fault. Okay. Now, if this is your first time joining me live, welcome, 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 welcome. My name is Natasha, and this is the Quiet Mic. This is a space for people who are leading teams and want real practical tools that actually work in the real world. No fluff, no corporate speak, just straightforward conversations about what it takes to lead well. Okay. Today, we are streaming live. So if you are here, go ahead, drop a hello in the comments. I would love to know that you're here with me. Okay. And if you're watching the replay later, because a lot of you do, I want to welcome you too. Go ahead, drop a replay in the comments if you're catching the replay. Everything we cover here today applies either way. So you're all good, no worries. All right. Now, if this is your kind of content, go ahead, hit that subscribe button or follow so you don't miss what's coming. It genuinely does help the community to grow. All right. Now, let's get into it. So, here's the thing about team confusion it does not always look like confusion. And that is actually what makes it very hard to catch. You see, it doesn't look like, your team sitting around with question marks floating over their heads. It looks more like people working really hard and still missing the target. It looks like the same questions landing on your desk over and over again. It looks like low initiative from people who are fully capable. It looks like check-ins that you feel like you're just doing the work yourself anyway. They're supposed to be check-ins. And when leaders see those type of symptoms, the natural instinct is to diagnose the team. You diagnose them as, oh, they're not motivated, or they don't care enough, or they just need more training, or you may even think that they need more accountability. But here's what I want you to sit with before you go any further. Okay. When a whole team is confused, the problem almost never is with the team. Let that sit for a moment. Okay. So let's talk about where it actually starts. And today I have four realizations for you. And I will say this right now. Um, Once you see these, you cannot unsee them. You're going to walk away from this conversation and immediately think of at least one situation where this was happening right under your nose. Okay. So I want to start with the big one. Realization number one: confusion does not start with the team, it starts at the top. Let that sit for a moment. I'm not blaming you, no attacks. I'm freeing you. Let me explain. Okay, stay with me. This is the one that tends to sting a little bit. So that's why I said stay with me. I'm going to say it directly and then give you a full picture so it actually makes sense. Most leaders believe that they have communicated everything clearly because they spoke. I spoke, I said it, I did the thing, I sent the email, I mentioned it in a meeting, and in their mind, the message was delivered, done, check, received, moved on, right? Right? But here's the distinction that changes everything. Transmitting is not the same as communicating. One is about sending, and the other is about landing. Okay. Think about it this way: you tell your team, we need to move faster on client deliverables. There, you said it, you meant it, you moved on. But what did your team actually hear? I can tell you. Some of them heard work longer hours, some heard cut corners where you can, some heard the client's very unhappy and we're in trouble. And at least one person heard noted and also maybe started quietly updating their resume just in case. Okay. Now, in that scenario, you have one message, just one, and there's four different interpretations. And now you have a team that's moving in four different directions, all of them thinking that they're doing exactly what you asked. That is not a team problem. That is a communication gap. And it starts at the top. Okay. Now, I'm not saying this to put it all on you. Okay. I want to be clear. I'm saying it because it's actually good news. Here's why. If you created the gap, then you can close the gap. Okay. And that is exactly where we are headed. Okay. But first, let's keep going because there's more to this. Okay. I'm not going to be here before you long. Realization number two: there are three things that leaders leave unclear without realizing it. Now, before I get into this one, there are three parts to this realization. So stay with me. Okay. Get a pen and paper if you need to. Okay. So now I want to get specific because vague leadership advice is honestly a big part of the same problem that we're talking about. So let's be direct. There are three things that leaders consistently leave foggy, and they do it without even realizing it. Three things. At least one of them is probably showing up in your team right now. Yeah. The first one is direction, not just the destination, but the why behind and what winning actually looks like along the way. Now, a lot of leaders, they share the goal, but they skip the context. They say something like, we're moving into a new market this quarter, and the team is going to nod. And internally, people are thinking, okay, but what does this mean for my current workload? What actually matters most right now? Are we in growth mode or are we just trying to survive this quarter? Okay. When the direction is unclear, people default to what they think you want. And that is where a lot of time and effort ultimately gets wasted, unfortunately. The second one is expectations. Specifically, what does good actually look like? Because it's open to interpretation for a lot of people. This one is sneaky because leaders often think that they have set expectations when all they've actually done is name a task. Telling somebody to prepare a report is not the same as telling them what the report should accomplish, who the audience is for, the audience is, how much detail is appropriate, and when it needs to get done. Those are expectations, but without them, your team is just guessing. Example: picture this. You ask someone to pull together a summary for an upcoming leadership presentation, and they spend an entire day on it. 20 pages. They give you charts, it's appendix. They even added a table of content, bless their heart. And you're thinking along the lines of a one-page overview. That's all you were thinking. Neither of you are wrong, but the expectation was never made very clear. So now both of you lose time. The third one is decision authority. Now, this one is the quiet confidence killer on teams. Who decides what? If your team doesn't know the answer to that, they're going to bring every single decision back to you. It's not because they can't handle it, but because they genuinely just don't know if they're allowed to. So what happens is that they feel the team is dependent and they're just waiting for permission that they were never given. Remember this, a team that keeps asking for permission has usually never been told that they even have it. Okay. So we have direction, expectations, and decision authority. When one of those, even just one of those three, is foggy, your team is going to stall. When all three are unclear at the same time, you end up with a team that looks disengaged and they're actually just a little lost. Now, here's what really gets interesting for me, because the next realization is one that a lot of leadership content never really touches, and it's specifically for a certain kind of leader. Realization number three, quiet leaders are especially at risk here. Now, I want to slow down just a little bit on this one, because if you are the kind of leader who operates quietly, who thinks things through before you speak, you process internally before you share anything, this one is specifically for you. And I want you to hear it the right way. Quiet leaders are incredible thinkers, phenomenal. You work through complexity in your head, you consider multiple angles, you weigh things carefully, you don't just react. And then once you've reached a conclusion, then you share it. But here's what often happens in that process, you share the conclusion without sharing the journey that got you there. Yeah, guilty. Okay. So what happens is that your team gets the answer, but they don't get the reasoning behind it. So they don't understand why this decision was made over another decision that could have been made. Um, and what happens is that without that context, your team cannot replicate your thinking. They can't act with confidence in situations because you haven't already pre-answered those things for them. So they wait every single time. They wait for you to process, for you to decide, and for you to deliver. So you're doing all the work. Here's what that looks like in real life. You've been sitting on a decision, but about a client relationship for about 2 weeks. You thought it through thoroughly thought it through. You send a short message to your team saying, we're going to hold off on the proposal until Q3. Clear enough, right? Well, your team doesn't know if that's because the client relationship is uncertain. They don't know if there's a budget constraint or if you're managing internal capacity or if there's a strategic shift happening. They know nothing. So when the client follows up directly, your team has no idea what to say. And then you end up having to manage that conversation yourself yet again. Okay. You're in the weeds. And it's not because your team is incapable, but because they didn't have enough to work with. You see, your team doesn't need you to think out loud, but they do need enough of your thinking to act without you. Okay. That's the shift that takes a quiet leader from being the bottleneck to being the person who actually multiplies the team's capacity. We want multiplication. Okay. And it doesn't require you to become someone that you're not. It just requires one small, deliberate adjustment in how you share and how you share information. Okay. And that brings me to the last realization. I told you I'm not going to be here before you long. This is the one that ties everything together. Realization number four, clarity is not about saying more, it's about saying the right things deliberately. Okay. So at this point, you might be thinking, okay, I hear you. I need to over communicate. I need longer emails. I need longer meetings. Explain everything, explain every single decision from top to bottom, right? No, that's actually not what I'm saying at all. At all. And honestly, if you take that approach, it creates a different kind of noise that your team then has to sort through. Okay. Clarity is not about volume, clarity is about precision. It means choosing the right things to say on purpose so that your team has actually what they need and nothing extra that they got to figure out. Okay. So here are three simple shifts, and I mean simple, nothing complicated here because we're keeping things simple here. The first shift is what I call the recap ask. Okay. At the end of every conversation where you give direction, instead of asking any questions, like people normally do, which, you know, it almost gets silence at this point. When you know there's definitely questions. Instead, try saying something like, "Can you tell me what we're walking away with as your top priority?" Okay. That one question will surface more misalignment than a whole month of follow up meetings combined. Now, the second shift is the one sentence priority. And at the start of any week or new project phase, you can give your team one sentence, just one, that completes this thought. So, for example, you could say, "The most important thing we accomplished this week is blank." Okay. Now, that's just one sentence and it gives everyone the same North Star to work from. The third shift is the decision boundary. Now, for any project or ongoing responsibility that you tell your team explicitly, you have full authority to decide X. Before you decide Y, bring it to me. Okay? That distinction takes out any guesswork and it leaves your team feeling more capable of what they can do. Okay? Here's the thing. Clarity is not a gift that you give your team. It's the foundation that they build their confidence on. Okay? When those three things are in place, something really does shift in a feel good, not in a feel good kind of way or an inspirational or anything like that, but it's in an actual, a difference that you can see by the end of next week. Okay. But this leads me to the part that I really want you to sit with before we close out here today. Here's what actually changes when your team finally does have clarity. They stop asking you the same questions, and it's not because they stopped caring, but it's actually because they already have what they need to answer it themselves, and that's what you want. They move with more confidence, which means they move faster and more accurately. You stop spending your days managing confusion and you start actually leading. And that is the difference between a leader who is always stuck in the details or is stuck in the weeds and one who has built a team that they can genuinely move, that the team can move without them. Okay. And that doesn't come from working harder, it comes from communicating more deliberately or intentionally. So here's what I want you to take away today: your team is not confused because they're not good enough. Okay. Let's be clear about that. They're confused because there are gaps in the system around them. And you, as their leader, are the only person in a position to close those gaps. The most powerful thing in a quiet leader that a quiet leader can do is not to speak more, is to speak with intention. And that is what steady, calm leadership actually looks like. And it's actually very, very available to you. Okay. Now, before we close out today, I want to give you one thing to actually do with what you just heard. Just one. This week, pick one project or a team relationship where clarity has just been a little foggy and try just one of the three shifts that we talked about today. Just one, nothing overwhelming. The recap acts, the one sentence priority, or the decision boundary. Again, just one, and tell me what happens. I want to hear it from you. Go ahead, drop it in the comment and tell me which one of the three you're going to try first. Okay. Go ahead, put it down there. Even if you're watching a replay, put it in the comments. Why? Because I read them and I will respond. Now, if this conversation gave you something useful, please, by all means, share with one leader in your life who needs to hear it. That's honestly one of the best ways to help this community to grow and to keep the conversations going. Also, please make sure that you subscribe or follow if you haven't already. Remember, the quiet ones move the room. So let your quiet speak loud. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.